So whether he's on the world stage at Davos or on a red carpet with the stars of Heated Rivalry, Mark Carney has been all over the news, and so many people have lots of questions about what he's up to. So I think I have the inside scoop on Mark Carney's secret plan for a sustainable economy. My name's Tim Nash. My company is Good Investing. I'm a certified financial planner that helps people align their investments with their values. And I've been looking at sustainable economy and finance for almost 20 years now. And I've got a lot of thoughts about what's going on. So let's jump into it. So everyone's talking about Mark Carney right now, really making a big splash in Canada, but also around the world. He just had that big speech in Davos. I know at the World Economic Forum. Oh my goodness. You know, he's showing up there and kind of rocking the boat a little bit. But a lot of my friends in the sustainable finance community are not happy with him right now. People are a little bit upset. He killed the carbon tax. This GFANZ Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which was a huge mission of his for so long, is now gonzoed. And he signed this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta, kind of creating the pathway for a new pipeline. And a lot of my friends are grumpy and upset and just not too happy with Mark Carney right now. But I see it a little bit differently. I could be wrong on this, but my instinct is that he's actually what I'm calling a sheep in wolf's clothing. Instead of a wolf in sheep's clothing pretending to be a sheep, he's actually a sheep. He's one of the good ones, but he's very good at wearing that suit and playing that role of being the rich old white guy in a room full of powerful rich old white guys to be able to advance sustainability, but with a longer term agenda. So I'm going to jump into what I think is Mark Carney's secret plan for a sustainable economy. A little bit of background on Mark Carney's role in sustainable finance is that for a long time, he was like the guy in sustainable finance globally, that his credibility on the financial world is unmatched, that he was governor of the Bank of Canada and then governor of the Bank of England. The fact that they got a Canadian to be the governor of the Bank of England is like kind of a big deal. Since then, you know, he's really been pushing forward this agenda of sustainable finance. He launched something called GFANZ, the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which was getting all of these different financial institutions and global players to align on a net zero vision for the economy. He did a speech like 10 years ago on something called the tragedy of the horizon. So this was like a huge speech in financial circles. A lot of us have heard of the tragedy of the commons, right? Where we kind of erode these common spaces and these common issues. If nobody is paying for it, then anything that is common and free to use just gets overused and gets eroded. Well, we know that's a market failure. He introduced this idea of the tragedy of the horizon, that with climate change, you know, really what we're doing is screwing over future generations. And this idea of a long-term time horizon, that there's this gap between the problems that are going to arise in the long term versus the solutions that we need to implement today, and kind of calling that out, that if we don't start looking ahead, we don't look towards the horizon, we're going to be screwing over future generations. So a lot of us in the sustainable finance community really looked up to Mark. He was our guy, that he's the guy who understood. He wrote this book called Values, which was this play on words and this notion of value and economic value and financial value versus moral values. And he called out that we have all of these quote unquote externalities, something I've been talking about for decades, drives me nuts, how it's free to pollute and how we don't put a price on all of these social and environmental impacts. So we know that he gets it when it comes to sustainable finance. He is one of the smartest minds, but we haven't seen it so far with him as Prime Minister. Before I talk about the plan for a sustainable economy, I think it's really important to understand where we are right now in this moment, because I think he's got two big priorities that are short term, that are coming ahead of any of these sort of longer term plans for a sustainable economy. And those two main issues that we're facing right now is, number one, our economy's reliance on the US, and number two, division in Canada between different provinces. I don't think I need to talk too much about the issue with the US. I mean, obviously, we're doing everything that we can to diversify our exports and to have different trading partners. That does mean that we're probably going to be getting into bed with some less than savory other countries. You know, we did see Mark Carney spend some time in China, go to Qatar and sign a deal there. You know, India, I'm hearing, is probably going to be a pretty big market for our oil. So it's going to be a little bit tricky there. What I would say is that in the short term, we are facing this massive crisis with our neighbors to the south. So I kind of want to cut the guys some slack there in the sense that it doesn't surprise me that we're looking for other trading partners. The second crisis we're facing is this division between provinces in our country. Now, I'm someone who grew up when I was young. I saw the Quebec referendum. I remember watching that and that Quebec vote, and it was so close. Like we were this close to having Quebec separate, and that sucked. It was terrible. It was such a huge distraction for the entire country, and I, for one, never want to see anything like that again. So it doesn't surprise me that Mark Carney is trying to kind of cut things off at the pass here, that if he can get ahead of these issues, both with Quebec and with Alberta, I think he's going to do it. And so I really think that that is the short-term priority, is really breaking down some of these interprovincial barriers, building some of these kind of national projects, and really doing things that might not totally align with his vision or my vision for a sustainable economy, but that in the short term are going to help to mend the fences here within Canada to get us moving together as one country. Understanding that these are two short-term crises that we are facing as a nation, I kind of want to cut the guys some slack a little bit. Like, let's let them cook a bit. Let's get through sort of these immediate threats, because I think there is something going on in the background that I am very excited about. The biggest thing I'm seeing happening behind the curtains is the introduction of something called Canada's Quality of Life Framework. Now, this is a framework that was introduced by Trudeau, and I think it was sort of 2022, coming out of COVID. This was the finance ministry for the first time published this framework for quality of life. Now, I've long been studying different alternatives to GDP. I really think we need to move beyond GDP as our primary measure of progress. It really just doesn't cut it. It ignores way too many things. I've studied things like Bhutan's gross national happiness. There's this really cool framework I love called donut economics. There's this notion of the genuine progress indicator. And I've seen a lot of different measures looking at these ideas of well-being or happiness, but they're all a little fuzzy in the sense that the language that we use around happiness and well-being doesn't resonate with the more conservative crowd. It just doesn't. It's too easy for them to dismiss and throw off to the side. And that's why I love this framing of quality of life, because who doesn't want a better quality of life? This thing is absolutely a no-brainer that we want to improve our quality of life, especially right now when we're in a cost of living crisis, where everything is just getting so much more expensive, especially fundamental human needs. Things like food and shelter are just so much more expensive that quality of life becomes a really, really nice framing for that, because we can look at the cost of living versus the quality of life improvements. And I think that's going to give us a way better way of measuring whether we're actually getting a good bang for our buck. And this new quality of life framework is actually how the government is now evaluating new spending proposals. So whenever there's a new program that comes to the Treasury Board, well, guess what? They have to describe what impact it's going to have on the quality of life of Canadians, which I think is such a huge improvement. And more than that, it was actually in Mark Carney's letter to the Privy Council, which is the organization that governs all of Canada's civil servants. So the entire bureaucracy that we have and all of these workers in Ottawa are now considering this quality of life framework as one of their primary goals to achieve. I love this idea because it allows us to talk about human capital and social capital and natural capital alongside financial capital and alongside good governance, that it encompasses all of these things. And the first step towards actually improving these things is to measure them. So I love that there's this really cool hub on Stats Canada where I can go in and look at the different indicators and measure where we're actually achieving any degree of progress over time. Now, I have a lot more to say about Canada's quality of life framework, so stay tuned in the coming weeks and months because this is a topic I'm going to be doing more deep dives into. But for now, I just want to introduce this to Canadians. I think most people have never even heard of this quality of life framework, and it's something happening behind the scenes that I am so excited about. The other thing happening behind the scenes is Canada's green bonds. Now, I've been following green bonds for a long time. I've done a bunch of videos. If you've been following my work, you know how much I love green bonds. Because I don't think a lot of Canadians realize that since 2022, Canada has issued 5 green bonds to the tune of $15.5 billion. This is money that we've raised that has gone towards green projects, that there are standards and definitions for what green bonds can be used for. Now, those standards are a little bit lax, and so that's why I was really happy to see an announcement in December from the finance minister that we're finally going to get Canada's green economy taxonomy. This is a list of definitions for what constitutes a green investment. I'm certain this is what's going to be used for the green bond framework. Now, there's going to be a big debate about this. This is the conversation, and this is sort of the battleground for this year because there's a big question about what green means. Is it going to count carbon capture and sequestration? Probably. Is it going to count nuclear as green? I don't know. There's even actually some folks pushing for natural gas to be included in this sustainable finance taxonomy, which for me, fossil fuels have no place in, this kind of green taxonomy. But again, some people view natural gas as a transition fuel. And so this is where the battle lines have been drawn right now, is around this sustainable finance taxonomy that we're going to be using for green bonds. This is, in my mind, going to open up the door to what I think Mark Carney is going to do, is do a massive green bond raise. The number I have in my head is $100 billion. Now, I don't think this is going to happen until next year, that this taxonomy is set to be published by the end of 2026. So it's going to take a long time for that to go through. I don't expect a big announcement before that. But then once that taxonomy is there, that lays the groundwork for a massive green bond raise. And can you imagine the publicity we'd get if the government of Canada issued a $100 billion green bond? This is how we can pay for high-speed rail. This is how we can pay for transmission lines across the country to be able to connect these massive renewable energy projects that are being built right now. This is how we're going to pay for a lot of the green infrastructure. I hope that it'll also include incentives for us little folks to do things like install heat pumps and get better insulation in our homes. Wouldn't it be cool if we could access super low interest loans to be able to make those green improvements in our lives? That would be awesome. So to me, this is something I see that has huge potential that not a lot of people are looking at. And I really think that Mark Carney's got this kind of secret plan that, he's out there in the world and working on these major sort of short-term crises that Canada is facing. But in the back rooms, I know these conversations are taking place. I can see the data starting to be collected, and I see him laying the groundwork for moves that I think are really going to move Canada towards having a sustainable economy. So we'll see. Time will tell whether I'm right or wrong. But for now, just really happy to shine a light on these things and what I'm seeing, and hopefully, asking people to sort of cut them a little bit of slack for now, recognizing that we're probably not going to agree with every single move that he makes. And hey, it's fine to criticize those things, but I do think that there's a bigger strategy at play. If you're ready to align your personal finances with a sustainable economy, I've got good news for you. My classroom has a 25% off sale from now until March 2nd, the RSP deadline. Join the classroom, get access to all of my courses, some amazing resources. I do AMAs, Ask Me Anything sessions to answer all your questions. Use the coupon code 25OFF, numbers 25OFF at checkout for your 25% discount. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.